wanted to do a quick video going through Look into Maxi, a stats site dedicated to the Maximus DAO stake pools. And if you're not aware, there's their amazing products, liquid hex stakes, lower end stake fees, because you're pooling everyone together in a single stake. And so there's Maxi, Deci, Lucky Tree, and Base, and hex stakes go for a maximum of 15 years, which is what Maxi is, and the products go down 10, 7, 3, 1 in length to Base, which recently completed its first year. And actually all four of the perpetuals, which are the tokens which restart after their stake finishes, they had their 1 year birthday recently, which is a pretty big deal for speaking for the contract code, and that it works and everything works flawlessly. So that's awesome to see. But this site is really a way to look at the tokens from different angles, just because there's so much game theory packed into them, because they're built on top of Hex, which is already packed full of game theory. And so these liquid tokens, which were originally minted 1-for-1 with Hex, their price has gone up and down all through the first year, while the underlying stakes have accrued value through the Hex yield. And so it's just been so interesting to see how their stats have changed. And so I made the site just based on a spreadsheet, which I made for myself personally. And, there was just like a bit of giving back. Like, I wanted to give back to the Hex community. I wanted to contribute. There's so many awesome tools out there. And I felt like this was kind of like a gap. No one had really dug deep into the numbers. So I wanted to make the data public at some point, and since we're kind of pumping in Hex right now and seemingly entering a bull market on Bitcoin and Ethereum and altcoins as well, I wanted to get more attention to how awesome these products are. These these pooled Hex stake bonds. I mean, depending on who I speak to, I use different language, right? Like, I explain these to my family members sometimes as kind of like bonds. And so, the trying to value them because they haven't kind of matured yet, and they mature at a certain date, which we can go into, is really interesting. So on the homepage, Look into Maxi, there's a bunch of different pages up here in the menu which you can jump to. We'll go through those. But the first page is a massive table, and this is kind of where I started with trying to figure out whether one of these tokens was kind of under or overvalued, and which one I wanted to buy based on my time preference as well. And so, the top stats, this is basically everything that you need, but the length, the ticker, the price, the cost per T-share, which is a big one, the number of these tokens that you need to get one Hex T-share. Then my two kind of favorite stats here are the discount or premium to mint. And so, as I mentioned, these tokens were minted 1-for-1 with Hex at the beginning, like about a year ago. And so you can see that eMaxi is at around a 50% premium to mint. So it's worth around 1.5 or so Hex. And you can kind of see that down here as well when we look at the backing value section, which goes into a bit more detail into the backing value based on mint. So it's around 1.56 Hex right now. And then Deci, which is at a 14% discount to mint, so it's about it's worth about 0.85 Hex, and so on and so forth. So basically all of the tokens are at a premium to the mint, which is kind of what you would expect, because the stake has been accruing yield the whole time, the whole first year. And the whole kind of valuing thing is really interesting, because we know that they're not worth 1 Hex because they were minted for 1 Hex, or that's kind of like the floor. And we know that in a couple years' time, when each of these stakes comes out, they're going to be redeemable for more than 1 hex, right? So somewhere, and we can look at those numbers as well, but depending on how much yield they're producing, I mean, for Maxi, you're going to be getting around 5 hex for one Maxi, 5 to 6 or something like that. And so the value right now, because we're in the middle of the stake, it's kind of like, is it 1? No. Is it 5 or 6? No. So it's somewhere in the middle, and in terms of fair value. So that's why it gets like super interesting. And then you have the discount to premium based on the stake backing. And so that's just looking at how much hex principal plus yield it's accrued, because it's accruing yield every day. And so calculating that for each of these tokens, and then looking at the whether the value of the token is above or below what it should be. So that's just another angle. You can see Emaxi and most of the tokens actually today are bang on the stake backing value, so the interest plus yield, and then DESI is at a 35% discount. Then you have the APY in hex, which is kind of the standard APY, disregarding like what the price is doing, just based on the mint, the 1-for-1 mint for hex for the whole stake. And then you have the APY in dollar values. So I'm still thinking through the APY section stuff, but yeah, depending on the price, from today onwards, you could get a higher or lower APY, just because the token may be overpriced. So anyway, take this section with a grain of salt. I'm still thinking through it. It does get a bit complex in terms of calculating. And then there's just like more sections on the backing versus mint, the principal plus hex, so the backing value analysis. This is an interesting metric, like the percentage jump up if it went back to the backing value. And so because DESI is at a decent discount of 35%, it actually represents a 55% uptick in value if it snaps back to its backing. So that's kind of interesting to look at, just because of how percentages work. And then there's kind of like numbers, but like looking at estimates for what you'll get for the entire stake at the end. And so as I mentioned, it's like around 6.5 hex that you'll be able to redeem at the end. This number is actually going to always change just based on the payout, the daily payout per T-share. So far it's kind of been increasing. Then it's 4 for DESI, and yeah, a bit lower for the others, but then you can kind of see total yield, and then this APY figure again, and then some just like general stats, because this is what people ask for constantly. I should actually add the contract addresses here. That's like one of the biggest questions people ask. But you know, how long the stake is exactly in days, in years, days so far, years so far, stake days left, total T-shares in the stake, so I can go into that number. The T-share rate at start, effective T-share rate today, and then the total supply of the tokens, which is also interesting. And so this is something that I'll probably start adding, which is the periods. Don't know how to best visualize it, but there's going to be more than one period. We're already entering the second period for base, and so technically it's a fresh stake, so I kind of need to run the numbers again. Then you have the payout in hex principal for like $100 principal for today, starting today. So if you started if you had $100, kind of what that would get you, which I think is quite useful just to use a round number for that. Because using a dollar value, just because the discounts exist and the pricing is so mismatched at times, you can often kind of, I don't know if scalp is the right word, but you can, buy certain coins on certain days versus others. Then, so that's the ROI in hex, and then the ROI in dollars. And then this is a kind of an interesting analysis for Deci, just because at one point, and I think still now as well, like Deci, the yield that you can get by buying Deci at the 10-year mark is actually more at some points than Maxi at 15 years, just because of how undervalued it is. So anyway, that's just something to look at. And then you have the same numbers for Pulse, so you can kind of flick between the two chains and just see, Deci seems to be at a pretty consistent discount on both right now, but at times the numbers vary quite wildly. Like you can see P-Lucky is pretty close to its backing mint, but on Ethereum, and you often see this on Ethereum as well, just it's more volatile because the liquidity is thinner. So yeah, and then the kind of coolest area of the site, I guess, is the delta discounts, which I think just encapsulates what is actually going on quite well. The original chart that one of the founders of Maximus DAO, Goldkey, made was this kind of like linear chart over time of the hex state accruing yield from one hex all the way up, and then the actual value kind of like a sine wave oscillating around that backing value. And we've seen that play out almost perfectly on Maxi, which is pretty awesome. You can see that at the start of the hex state we're starting at around 1 hex the first day, and then immediately goes up to a 2 hex backing, more than a 2 hex backing value, just because the price shot up versus hex. Then it came back down to its backing, then it was at a discount for a while, and so this is the backing. So the yellow line is the principal plus yield, so that's actually the not the discount or premium based on the mint. So this is including the yield. So it's just really interesting to see how it oscillates like that. And then Deci, which has been at a pretty consistent discount for a while, but recently has been kind of following its trend a tiny bit more, and the discount has closed a bit, but you can see how aggressively, like just marching forward, accruing yield despite the discount. So don't forget that at year 10, if this discount still remains at 20% or 30%, it's going to snap back up to the backing value pretty violently. And I don't think the discount will, this isn't financial advice, nothing in this video is, but you have to just imagine different scenarios, right? Like if this discount persists for the next 9 years until redemption, what's going to happen? Like on the last day, it's just going to snap back up to the redemption value, and someone is going to get like an insane deal and make like 200% return on a day. AP, like normalized in terms of APY, it's going to be crazy. So I don't think the market's going to let that happen. And so you can kind of speculate on why this discount exists, which is something you can do. And then when you go to the shorter time periods, like the 7-year, 3-year, you can see that it tracks really closely, quite beautifully actually, to see. and then just like Trio as well. Like Trio is probably, yeah, Trio is one of the coolest ones just because it tracks so tightly, and it's definitely, you can see the increase in the yield quite visibly. On base, you can't see it as visibly. It's a bit, you can see it, but anyway, you can see that it's hugging its backing value quite closely. Okay, and then the same for pulse chain. We have kind of like a marker for pulse chain launch. All of the data previous to pulse chain launch is just the E token data. I thought it would still be valuable so that you can kind of switch between the two chains and see how, for example, Maxi is a bit smoother, and then P Maxi has been a bit more erratic in its price and in a bit more of a discount for longer periods. And then P Deci as well has definitely had more of a discount, consistent discount since Pulse Chain launched. P Lucky also at a discount on Pulse Chain, and then P Trio and P Base pretty bang on their backing. So yeah, that's the delta discounts, and then the percentage discounts is just kind of like normalizing the backing value to 0% or 0, and then looking at just looking at both the discount from mint and the discount from the principal plus yield. So I mean, I'm a big fan of Deci just because of the discount, but it's kind of closing now, right? You can kind of see that. I mean, we went all the way up to a premium on the mint recently, and then the backing is still, undervalued. So yeah, there's that. Prices need to do more work here, but the idea would be to be able to kind of compare two or three tokens to one another, but they all track so closely. We're having a really nice pump right now. Cool, and then the backing value, this is more of like a calculator page, so assuming that the stakes started today, which they're not, but you can kind of see this is how the behavior of the stakes differ quite nicely. So if you want to look at Maxi and Base, for example, you can see that they were minted both 1-for-1 for Hex, and then over the next 15 years, Maxi's accrual of yield is much higher than Base's, but obviously Base you can redeem just way earlier, and the next Base stake has actually already started, so it would just continue on like this and probably end up somewhere, not sure where, and then you can kind of compare, like Maxi and Deci. This is what it will basically get you, around 4 point something, and then 6 point something at the end for one. And then the backing in dollars per year, this is still a bit of a work in progress just because there's a few assumptions here, like the stakes starting today, which they don't, the fact that Maxi starts on the same day as the perpetuals, which they don't. But this is looking at kind of, just to give you an idea of, based on today's prices, $1 into each of these tokens, how the steepness differs, so the APY basically, how it differs just because of the discount. And so the Deci discount is leading to a much higher steepness in the chart. So you're able to just get way more T-shares for the price. And you can kind of see that on the table, the amount of T-shares that you can get. And so the effective yield that you can get, it generates you a much higher APY, and at points it can be higher than Maxi in even at the 10-year mark. So um, it can make sense to get Deci over Maxi just purely based on the yield even at year 10. So yeah. So that's a bit of a calc. You can also change the numbers here. I mean, I don't know how useful that would be, but just to give you an idea of, if you wanted to do something very specific, you could kind of scope out the numbers for that investment that you wanted to make. Same with the minted hex. And you can even put the supply of Maxi in here if you wanted to kind of ballpark of what it's the size of the stake plus the principal plus interest would be at the end. So it's quite a lot, 1.8 billion. Yeah, on a 270 million principal. So that's pretty cool. X's on X's. All right, so ARBs. This is actually probably low-key one of my favorite pages, just because it's hard because of the liquidity, right? I think if the liquidity was thicker, which it is on Pulse actually, right? But on Ethereum, often where the big discounts are, but not always, it's just harder to trade, for example, like trade Maxi for base or whatever. It's just depends on if there's liquidity. So we have things like Fux on Pulse, which helps with that. But essentially what this page is it's the backing of each token compared to any other token based on the principal plus yield. So let me just read this. The backing value of each token is calculated based on principal plus yield generated by each coin so far in their stakes. The total difference between the discount or premium for each coin is summed. So basically the backing value that you saw on the table here, this discount, so the minus 38% is plussed with, say, the 1.26% to give you like a minus 37% or so. So that just gives you an idea of, like, if you went Maxi to Deci, what kind of a deal would you get? And so for these tokens on the left side of the table, if they're positive, they're overpriced. So Deci, eDeci is negative, so it's not overpriced, it's underpriced versus Maxi, and then Maxi is overpriced. So it would make sense potentially to swap Maxi for Deci. For small ARBs like this, it probably doesn't make sense just because of the slippage, but okay, here, if I'm overpriced, if I'm positive, I'm overpriced, so 36% to eDeci, so it might make sense to swap Lucky for eDeci, same with Trio, same with Base. Basically anything to Deci is game right now. And then same on Pulse Chain, going from Base to Deci, going from Base to Lucky, yeah, and then going from Maxi to Lucky also. So there's just different games that you can play, which just makes it really cool. Okay, so yeah, if you have any feedback, I would love it. I'm looking at expanding some of the stats on the site. Again, don't take it as gospel. This is just kind of to inform my opinion better, so not financial advice whatsoever. But definitely check out the numbers and let me know if you have any feedback. All right, take care. Bye-bye.